If Nathan Pierce hadn't walked into his children's playroom that night, he never would have believed what he saw with his own eyes. For years, he had thought of his home as a perfectly run machine: polished floors, elegant dinners, nannies who came and went with impeccable resumes but no real attachment. But that night shattered everything he thought he knew, and changed him forever. The twins, Olivia and Owen, were 4 years old, full of energy, and had been through more nannies than Nathan could count. He had stopped asking why they left. Turnover had simply become part of life in the Pierce household. Until Angela came along. Angela Harper was nothing like the polished candidates Nathan usually hired. She didn't have an expensive degree, she didn't wear designer clothes, and she didn't speak with the polished accent of someone who had gone to boarding school. She was a soft-spoken black woman in her late 20s who had been cleaning houses for years to make ends meet. When the agency sent her over for an interview, Nathan's first instinct was to politely decline. But then Olivia had run up to Angela and hugged her without hesitation. Owen followed suit, shy but smiling. Nathan hadn't seen that happen with anyone in years. Still, Nathan kept his distance. Angela was, in his mind, just the help. He respected her work ethic. She cooked, cleaned, and somehow kept the twins calm, but he didn't see her as part of the family. She wasn't hired to love his children, she was hired to manage them. That night, however, all those lines blurred. It was nearly midnight when Nathan returned home from a business dinner. The house was quiet, too quiet. Normally, the night nanny would have put the twins in their beds hours ago, lights out, doors closed. But as Nathan walked down the hall, he noticed a faint glow spilling from the playroom. He pushed the door open quietly, not wanting to wake them, and froze in place. The twins weren't in their beds. Instead, they were curled up on the floor, one on each side of Angela, their tiny heads resting on her arms. Angela herself was lying on a thin blanket, her knees slightly bent to fit between the toy bins, her head leaning against a stuffed giraffe. One of her hands was holding Owen's, the other resting protectively on Olivia's back. Nathan just stood there, taking in the scene. This wasn't part of her job. There were perfectly good beds upstairs, rooms with soft sheets and expensive pillows. Why was she here, on the hard floor, with his children? He was about to speak when he noticed the tear tracks on Olivia's face. Her cheeks were still damp, even in sleep. Angela's hair was slightly messy, her breathing slow and even, but there was a faint tension in her expression, as if she had been watching over them until exhaustion pulled her under. The sight stirred something deep in Nathan's chest. He backed away quietly and went to his office. But the image kept replaying in his mind, refusing to let him sleep. The next morning, curiosity got the better of him. Over breakfast, while the twins were still in their pajamas, he asked casually, "Why did you sleep in the playroom last night?" Angela hesitated, glancing at the twins. "Olivia had a nightmare," she said softly. She woke up screaming, and then Owen started crying too. "I tried to get them back into their beds, but they were too scared. I didn't want to leave them alone, so I just stayed there with them." Nathan frowned. "You could have called me. Or, I don't know, stayed until they fell asleep, then gone to your own room." Angela gave a small shrug. "They kept waking up. Every time I moved, they'd grab my hand. I figured it was easier to just stay put so they could rest." Nathan didn't know what to say. He had seen nannies who wouldn't even pick up a crying child without checking the clock for overtime pay. But Angela, someone who wasn't paid to work overnight, had chosen to sleep on the floor just to keep his kids from feeling alone. That day, Nathan watched her more closely. He noticed how she knelt to speak to the twins at eye level, how she let them help with breakfast even though it made a mess, how she listened patiently when Owen went on a 5-minute tangent about dinosaurs. And for the first time, Nathan realized she wasn't just doing a job, she was building trust. But trust, in Nathan's world, was fragile. 1 week later, he got a call from the agency. It wasn't about Angela's performance. they were quick to say she was one of the best, but about her past. Something about an eviction, some debt, and an accusation from a former client that she had overstepped boundaries. Nathan's instincts told him to be cautious. After all, he had 2 young children to protect. That evening, he found Angela folding laundry in the living room. The twins were playing nearby, building a fort out of cushions. Nathan cleared his throat. "I got a call from the agency today." Angela's hands paused mid-fold, but she didn't look up. "I figured they might," she said quietly. "Is it true?" he asked. She finally met his eyes. "Most of it. I fell behind on rent a while back when my mother got sick. I had to take time off to care for her, and things spiraled. As for the other part, I was accused of overstepping, because I told a mother that her son needed more than just expensive toys, he needed her attention. She didn't like that." Nathan studied her. She wasn't defensive, but there was a quiet strength in her tone, as if she was done apologizing for caring too much. Before he could respond, Olivia ran over and tugged on Angela's arm. "Can you read to us before bed?" she asked. Angela smiled, setting the laundry aside. "Of course, sweetheart." Nathan watched them walk away, the sound of Olivia's laughter echoing down the hall. Something inside him told him the agency's warnings didn't tell the whole story. And for reasons he couldn't fully explain, he wanted to know more. But the truth, once he learned it, would change far more than he expected. 2 nights later, Nathan came home earlier than usual. It was raining heavily, the kind of cold, steady downpour that made the city streets shine under streetlights. As he stepped into the foyer, he heard voices upstairs, Angela's, low and calm, and the twins' softer, slightly shaky replies. He followed the sound and found them in Olivia's room. The lights were dim, and Angela was sitting cross-legged on the rug, holding a flashlight under her chin as if telling a ghost story. But instead of scary tales, she was weaving a gentle story about a lost baby bird who found its way home. The twins were mesmerized. Owen was curled up in her lap, and Olivia was resting her head against Angela's side, both of them listening intently. Nathan leaned against the doorframe, unnoticed, and took in the scene. When the story ended, Angela kissed each child on the forehead. "You're safe. You're loved. Now close those eyes and dream big, okay?" The twins nodded sleepily and climbed into bed. Nathan waited until Angela stepped into the hallway before speaking. "That bird story, was that for them or for you?" Angela smiled faintly. "Both, I guess." They walked downstairs together, and Nathan found himself asking what he'd been wondering for days. "Why do you care so much about them? More than anyone I've ever hired?" Angela hesitated, glancing toward the rain streaking down the big kitchen windows. "Because I know what it's like to be a child who needs someone, and not have anyone there." Her voice softened, but it carried an edge of old pain. She told him about growing up in foster care, bouncing from home to home. How she'd never had a bed that was truly hers until she was 16. How one night, during a thunderstorm, she had cried alone in a bare room, wishing there was someone, anyone, to sit beside her and tell her she was safe. "I made myself a promise that night," Angela said quietly. "If I ever had the chance, I'd be that person for a child. Even if it meant sleeping on the floor." Nathan didn't say anything for a moment. He had always thought that providing for his kids meant money, private school, a big house, the best toys. But Angela was showing him something he had never considered, presence. Over the next few weeks, Angela's bond with the twins only grew stronger. They stopped having nightmares. They started laughing more, eating better, even playing together without constant bickering. Nathan noticed the difference, though he tried not to admit, especially to himself, that it had less to do with him and more to do with her. One Saturday morning, Nathan invited Angela to join them for a trip to the park. She hesitated at first, clearly unsure if it was part of her role, but eventually agreed. The twins raced ahead to the playground while Nathan and Angela sat on a bench. "They're different lately," Nathan said, watching Olivia help Owen climb the slide. Angela nodded. "They just needed to feel seen." He glanced at her, noting the way her eyes followed the children, alert, protective, yet gentle. "Angela, what happens if I can't keep you on? My business is going through some changes, Anne." She turned to him sharply. "Then I'll still check on them. I won't disappear from their lives. That's not how I work." Nathan believed her. And that scared him, because for the first time in years, he felt like his children, and maybe even he, were becoming attached to someone outside the family. But life has a way of testing the bonds we value most. That test came sooner than expected. One Friday evening, Nathan was working late in his home office when he overheard voices in the kitchen. The twins had already gone to bed, so it was just Angela, and someone else. A man's voice, low but tense. Curious, and slightly uneasy, Nathan walked toward the sound. When he entered the kitchen, he found Angela standing near the counter, facing a man in a worn leather jacket. His eyes were sharp, his posture rigid, and there was something about him that made Nathan instinctively wary. "You can't just show up here," Angela was saying in a hushed tone. "I didn't know where else to go," the man replied. "They said you might help me." Nathan cleared his throat, and both of them turned. Angela's eyes widened slightly. "Mr. Pierce, this is my brother, Marcus. He's just leaving." Marcus didn't argue. He gave Nathan a quick nod and walked out into the rain without another word. Nathan looked at Angela. "What was that about?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "It's complicated. But I promise, it won't affect the kids." Nathan wasn't so sure. He had trusted her more than anyone in years, but this was a piece of her life he knew nothing about. And in his world, hidden truths had a way of unraveling everything. He didn't yet know that the man in the leather jacket would force Angela to make the hardest choice of her life, and that choice would put the bond she'd built with the twins in jeopardy. The next morning, Nathan tried to go about his usual routine, but the image of Marcus standing in his kitchen wouldn't leave his mind. There had been something desperate in the man's eyes, something that didn't fit neatly into Nathan's comfortable, orderly world. Angela went about her work as if nothing had happened. She served breakfast, helped the twins get dressed, and packed their lunchboxes with little notes tucked inside. But Nathan noticed the way she kept glancing at her phone, as though she were waiting for a message she dreaded receiving. By midday, Nathan decided he couldn't let it go. While the twins were upstairs playing, he asked her to sit down in the sunroom. "You've been honest with me so far," he began, "so I'm going to ask again, what's going on with your brother?" Angela folded her hands in her lap. "Marcus and I grew up in the same foster homes, but we dealt with it differently. I tried to keep my head down. He made mistakes. Fell in with the wrong people." Nathan leaned forward. "What kind of mistakes?" Her voice softened. "Debt. The kind that doesn't come from credit cards. He owes money to people who don't exactly take late payments kindly. He came to me because he thought maybe I could lend him something, but I don't have that kind of money. I told him not to come here again. I didn't want to involve you or the kids." Nathan rubbed a hand across his jaw. Part of him wanted to believe her completely. Another part, the cautious businessman, was calculating risks. "Angela, if these people know where you work." "They don't," she interrupted. "And I won't let them. I promised you and I promised myself, those children are safe with me. Always." He held her gaze for a long moment and realized she meant every word. But a quiet unease lingered in his chest. Over the next week, things seemed to return to normal. The twins were thriving, Angela was her usual attentive self, and Marcus didn't reappear. Nathan almost convinced himself it had been a one-time disruption. Until the night it all came crashing down. It was a Thursday evening, and Nathan had been stuck in traffic on his way home. By the time he pulled into the driveway, the rain had started again, heavy and unrelenting. As he approached the front door, he noticed it was slightly ajar. His heart kicked hard against his ribs. Inside, the living room lights were off, but he could hear faint voices coming from the kitchen. Moving quickly but quietly, Nathan stepped inside, and froze. Marcus was back. He stood near the back door, his jacket dripping water onto the tile. Across from him was Angela, her body tense, one hand slightly extended as though trying to keep distance between them. "I told you, Marcus, I don't have it," she was saying, her voice low but urgent. "And you can't be here." Marcus's voice was harsher than before. "They're giving me one last chance, Ong. If I don't pay them by Monday, I'm done. And you know what that means." Nathan stepped forward. "Out. Now." Marcus turned, startled. His gaze flicked to Nathan, then to the hallway where the sound of small footsteps approached. Owen appeared first, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, his eyes wide. Angela moved fast, kneeling to block Owen's view of Marcus. "Hey, buddy. Why don't you go back upstairs with your sister? I'll be there in a minute." Owen hesitated, looking between them, but obeyed. When the boy was gone, Nathan's voice hardened. "I don't care who you are, you don't come into my house uninvited. Leave before I call the police." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Nathan's tone made him think better of it. He shoved his hands in his pockets and walked out into the storm. As soon as the door shut, Nathan turned to Angela. "That's it. I can't risk my kids being caught in the middle of whatever this is." Her face paled, but she didn't beg or argue. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'll pack my things." It was the calm in her voice that unsettled him most, not fear, not anger, just resignation. That night, after the twins were asleep, Nathan sat alone in his office, staring at the security footage from earlier. He saw the way Angela had positioned herself between Marcus and the hallway, how she had made herself a barrier without hesitation. And the truth hit him, she hadn't been protecting herself. She had been protecting his children. But by the next morning, she was gone. Her room was empty, the house felt colder, and the twins were asking where she'd gone with tears in their eyes. Nathan told them she had to take care of something important, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew he couldn't just let it end there. Because somewhere deep down, he realized he didn't just need Angela for the twins' sake, he needed her for his own. And finding her would mean stepping into a world he had spent his whole life avoiding. Nathan wasn't the type of man to go chasing after people once they walked out of his life. He had always believed in clean breaks and clear boundaries. But that Friday morning, as he dropped the twins off at preschool, their tearful question, "When is Angela coming back?" burned into him like a brand he couldn't ignore. By the time he pulled into his driveway, he'd already made up his mind. He was going to find her. It wasn't easy. Angela had left without giving any forwarding information, and the agency claimed they had no further contact details, for privacy reasons. Nathan knew they were lying, they just didn't want to get involved. So, he did what he did best in business, he started digging. Within hours, his contacts in real estate had tracked down an old address she had listed as her emergency contact, a rundown apartment building on the west side of town. When Nathan arrived, the rain from the night before had turned the streets slick and muddy. The building's paint was peeling, and the air smelled faintly of mildew. He knocked on the manager's door, introduced himself, and slipped a crisp $100 bill into the man's hand. The manager frowned thoughtfully. "Angela Harper." "Yeah, she's been staying with a friend over on Walnut Street. I think it's number 19. But if you're looking for her, you might find Marcus there too. He's been around a lot lately, and not in a good way." Nathan thanked him and left, his gut tightening. The Walnut Street address turned out to be an even smaller building, tucked behind an auto shop. He parked across the street, unsure what exactly he was walking into. Through the rain-speckled windshield, he could see Angela sitting on the front steps, her head bent, hands clasped together. She looked tired, more tired than he'd ever seen her. But she also looked up before he could get out of the car, as if she had felt him there. "Nathan," she said when he approached, surprise in her voice. "What are you doing here?" "I came to talk," he said. "And to bring you back." She shook her head. "You can't. Marcus, he's in deeper than I thought. They want the money by Monday, and if I'm anywhere near you or the kids when they come for him." "I don't care about the risk," Nathan cut in. "I care about you. And so do Olivia and Owen." Angela's voice dropped to a whisper. "It's not just about risk. These people, they hurt people, Nathan. I can't let them use me to get to you." Before he could answer, the growl of an engine made them both turn. A black sedan rolled slowly up the street and stopped in front of the building. Two men got out, one tall and thin with a sharp jawline, the other stocky with a heavy coat. Both looked like they belonged anywhere but in a friendly neighborhood. Angela's breath caught. "It's them." Nathan's instincts flared, but he didn't move away from her. The taller man stepped forward, eyeing Nathan with a mix of curiosity and calculation. "You're new," he said. "Friend of Marcus's sister?" Nathan kept his voice even. "No. I'm the man who's telling you to walk away." The man smiled thinly. "That's cute. But Marcus owes us 30 grand. We collect what we're owed, one way or another." Angela stepped forward quickly. "I told you I don't have it. But I'll work it off. Just leave him alone." The stocky man laughed. "You think we're running a charity? You don't pay, we take something else. And maybe your rich friend here would like to help out." Nathan's jaw tightened. He had spent his life negotiating with hard men in high-stakes boardrooms, but this was different. These men didn't care about contracts or reputations, they cared about control. "I'll pay it," Nathan said suddenly. Angela turned sharply. "No. Nathan, you can't." "I can," he said, his voice firm. "And I will. But after this, you and Marcus are done with them. Understand?" The taller man exchanged a glance with his partner, then shrugged. "Cash. Monday. No funny business." They got back into the sedan and drove off, leaving the air heavy with tension. Angela looked at Nathan like she didn't know whether to thank him or scream at him. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. "And you shouldn't have been facing it alone," he replied. "Now get your things. You're coming back with me." She hesitated for a long moment before finally nodding. That night, back at the Pierce house, the twins ran into Angela's arms as if she'd been gone for years. Nathan stood back, watching the way their little faces lit up, and made himself a silent promise, no matter what it cost him, he would keep her safe. What he didn't know was that the real test wasn't paying off Marcus's debt, it was what would happen when the people he'd just dealt with decided they weren't finished with Angela after all. Monday came with a gray sky and a restless wind. Nathan left early, carrying a leather briefcase that felt heavier than it should, even though it contained nothing but $30,000 in neatly bound stacks. He'd withdrawn the cash the day before, ignoring the bank manager's curious look. The meeting place had been chosen by the men from the black sedan, a closed-down warehouse on the outskirts of town. Nathan pulled up in his SUV, scanning the empty lot before stepping inside. His footsteps echoed against the concrete floor until two figures emerged from the shadows. "You brought it?" the tall man asked, his thin smile as cold as the air. Nathan set the briefcase on an overturned crate and flipped it open. 30,000. Every cent. The man's partner stepped forward, flipping through the stacks before nodding. "Looks good." Nathan kept his tone firm. "We're done. You leave Angela and her brother alone. No calls, no visits, no threats." The tall man's smile didn't fade, but it changed, something darker creeping in. That's the thing, Mr. Pierce. You paid his debt, sure. But Marcus? He's useful to us. Knows people, runs errands. We don't just let that go. Nathan's gut tightened. That wasn't the deal. Deals change, the man said simply, closing the briefcase. But, maybe we can work something out. You've got money. You keep paying, and maybe we forget about him, and Angela. Nathan's voice hardened. Not happening. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the tall man laughed softly, as if amused by Nathan's defiance. All right, Pierce. But don't be surprised if we come knocking again. Nathan walked out, every muscle in his body coiled tight. He knew this wasn't over. Back home, Angela was in the kitchen making lunch for the twins. She looked up when he came in, searching his face for answers. Is it done? For now, he said. But I don't trust them. We need to be careful. Her shoulders slumped with relief and worry all at once. Nathan, you didn't have to get involved like this. I never wanted to drag you into my problems. He stepped closer, his voice steady. They're not just your problems anymore. You're part of this family, Angela. Whether you like it or not. For the next week, life settled into a fragile rhythm. The twins were happier than ever, Angela was back in her role, and Nathan found himself spending more time at home, watching the way she transformed the atmosphere of the house. But peace has a way of slipping through your fingers when you least expect it. It happened on a Friday evening. Nathan was in his study finishing paperwork when Angela appeared in the doorway, pale and tense. Nathan, she whispered, they're here. He was on his feet in seconds. In the driveway, the same black sedan idled, its engine rumbling. The tall man stepped out, a lazy grin on his face, and this time, he wasn't alone, 3 others followed. Nathan walked outside, keeping his voice calm. I told you we were done. The man shrugged. We decided otherwise. Marcus is gone, disappeared before we could find him. So we figured maybe his sister can tell us where he went. Or maybe we just take something she cares about until he comes back. Nathan stepped between them and the house, his jaw tight. You're not getting near her. Or my kids. One of the men took a step forward, but before the situation could explode, sirens wailed in the distance. The tall man cursed under his breath, signaling to his crew. This isn't over, Pierce. They piled back into the sedan and sped away just as 2 police cruisers turned into the driveway. Angela stared at Nathan, stunned. You called them? He shook his head. No. Security system triggered when they stepped onto the property. It's set to alert the police automatically. Her voice trembled. What if they come back? Nathan looked at her with unwavering resolve. Then they'll find me waiting. And this time, I won't be alone. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, Angela sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. I can't keep putting you in danger, she said quietly. Maybe I should leave. Nathan shook his head. Angela, those kids don't just need a caretaker, they need you. And I need you here. We'll get through this. Together. Her eyes shimmered, and for the first time since she'd come into his life, she let herself believe it. In the weeks that followed, Nathan used his resources to help track down Marcus, get him out of town, and arrange for his debts to be cleared through legal channels. The men in the black sedan never returned. Life didn't go back to the way it had been before, it became something better. Nathan was more present with his kids, Angela was more than an employee, and the twins never had another night of nightmares. And though Nathan never forgot the night he found her sleeping on the floor with his children, it wasn't the moment he valued most. The moment that mattered, the one he carried with him, was the day she finally looked at him, smiled, and said, "We're home now." Sometimes, family isn't defined by blood or last names, it's defined by the people who show up when the storms hit, who hold your hand in the dark, and who choose to stay when they could walk away. Nathan thought he was giving Angela a job, but in truth, she gave him something far greater: love, loyalty, and the reminder that presence means more than possessions. And maybe that's the real lesson here: the people who change our lives don't always come dressed in the roles we expect. Sometimes, they arrive quietly, with a blanket on the floor and arms open wide, and we don't realize they've saved us until it's too late to imagine life without them.